Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Welcome to Tim Pegler. About 2012, towards the end of the Gillard government, there was a discussion in cabinet about cutting the funding for the National Health and Medical Research Council. A minister, who remained nameless, leaked it. Within 48 hours, there were white-coated scientists, a lot of young women funnily in the front row, white-coated young scientists demonstrating in the streets of Sydney and Melbourne. The proposal was quietly withdrawn very quickly. Nothing has more political power than the phrase, "we can cure cancer," unless, of course, it is the phrase, "but children are dying." Medical research succeeds where the rest of the research community fails. Medical research succeeds because they have a compelling message and they sell it well. But does that apply right across the rest of what they do? Tim Pegler knows about this stuff. He's been engaging with audiences, he's a journalist, he's an author, and now he's a health technology communicator. Insights from the health and medical sector. Tim looks at critical elements of successful storytelling, insights into how to identify and present key human points of engagement and insights, and how we all attempt to engage with universities. Tim Pegler on health technology. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for choosing Stream A. You can't help when there's a dual stream, but to look at the program and see who you're up against and think, how do I add value and pull people over to this room. So thanks for giving this one, a vote of confidence. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're on today, the original storytellers, the first storytellers on this country, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and long may their storytelling and their lessons for us continue. There's a few things I'm going to cover off today. I can't promise to talk so much about medical research, but I can talk to you about how products like the company that I work for can engage with medical research and the value that they might bring. But the main brief, and thank you to Future Campus for inviting me along today. It was a bit of an unexpected request. The main thing I'll be talking around is kind of messaging, traditional storytelling, and hopefully how that can add some value back to the higher education sector, lessons that I've learnt along the way. And I think there are some parallels in the industry that I find myself in now with the tertiary sector. I was trying to think through why the other Tim asked me to participate today. I suppose I do bring some multiple lenses to the lectern. So, like the other Tim, I'm a former newspaper journalist, and I'll chat to you about that. But I'm also a graduate and an alumni. I'm a parent, and I'm a partner to a mature age student at the moment as well. And I'm a vendor that deals with universities on a regular basis. So hopefully there'll be some value in there amongst that for you. So yeah, some of the things that we'll work through. We've done our thank yous, talked about me. The brief that I was given to chat about was things to do with, does higher education have image problems at the moment? Are there, is this question of a social contract, is the social contract broken? And what are some of the challenges of telling the stories of universities at the moment? As I say, I'll try and draw some parallels with the industry that I'm in at the moment. After I've been in professional communication all my life, really, but find myself in sales and marketing at the moment in the digital health technology sector. And then I'll get back to some basics and talk to you about storytelling. A little bit about me and where I've come from. I like to say that I published my first novel when I was in grade 4. There were 2 copies published. There was one for me and one for the girl that I was trying to impress. So, I still have a copy of that. I read it in schools occasionally when I'm doing writing classes. And I do take some joy in the fact that one of the chapters runs for about 3 pages and doesn't have any punctuation. So it was definitely a stream of consciousness creativity. And, there's something to be said for that. It was a story well ahead of its time about a girl who was just having to wear glasses for the first time. The kids at school were giving her a hard time. So it turns out when she puts the glasses on for the first time, they're magic glasses, and they actually help her see things that nobody else can see. And so that concept, I think the illustrations are very Harry Potter-esque, and if I'd had a better marketing team in grade 4, maybe I would have a much smaller mortgage. So, but yeah, I'm an English literature and criminology graduate. As the challenge for many people with arts degrees, they say to you, what line of employment is an arts degree going to take you down? And my daughter, who's doing arts at the moment, it really gets on my goat that family, friends, and people think that they can commentate on someone's choice of subjects and say, you're on a path to unemployment. I think that is an outrageous kind of comment. My career path from graduating took me straight into newspaper journalism, and I've been kind of paid to tell stories ever since. I did 10 years in newspapers. I started a newspaper called the Sun News Pictorial, which most of you probably don't remember, but it ended up merging in and becoming part of the Herald Sun. It used to be a good newspaper back then, not so much these days. I worked across all the major metropolitan papers in Melbourne. So I worked for the Sun, the Herald Sun, the Weekly Times. I worked for Australian Associated Press for a while, which is agency journalism, and then swapped over to Fairfax. So I worked for the Age for 5 years, and then swapped to the Australian. And then the internet was going nuts. So there was opportunities to move on from print and try digital. So I was an early adopter as a content manager on websites. Got made, I think one of the first web companies I worked for went spectacularly bankrupt, but we had 12 months of awesome fun building a website that nobody looked at. So that was an adventure. And so when that went bankrupt, the next kind of job that came along was in health tech, and it was a startup, again ahead of its time, that was started up by 3 PhD students, one from I think a couple from Melbourne University and a couple from one from VU maybe, but I can't remember exactly. But the 3 of them had this idea about doing online health and fitness training and coming up with an algorithm to score somebody's health and fitness, and on the basis of that to prescribe exercise and diet programs and chronic disease management programs. And they were probably a decade ahead of the market on that. It nearly went bankrupt as well, but it ended up being purchased by Medibank. And so I went with the furniture as part of the sale to Medibank. Didn't really fit in there, and had a bit of a health scare myself at the time. So took a break, worked on another novel, tried writing picture books, things like that. But then found my way back into technology. And so the next job was with Telstra Health. And so at Telstra Health, I was literally a content curator. I was looking for right information, right time around behavior change for diabetes management and other chronic disease programs. And then they had me, it's not a well-known job description, but when people create mobile apps for phones, someone has to go through the text that you see in apps. So it's called user experience writing. And so I'd be writing or spending weeks and then having to test and A/B test two different words on a screen to see if they work, to make people click in the right place. So that was an aspect of writing I'd never thought about before. I've had 2 young adult novels published. That's kind of my pride and joy, I think, professionally. Working on another one at the moment. Needless to say, they didn't go like Harry Potter, so they've done okay. But my last royalty check, and the most recent of these books is 10 years old now. So my last royalty check was $3.45. So I can afford to buy you half a coffee with that. So, I've been a professional speaker. There are some good public speaking agencies in Melbourne that particularly place authors in schools or motivational speakers, those sorts of things. So I've done a bit of that over the journey as well, and yeah, done a lot of writing workshops with cranky teenagers who say they don't know how to write creative essays. So always great fun. And then, yeah, find myself in sales and marketing now, and it's not necessarily a comfortable place, but I'm still feel a bit conflicted by it. But there's an essential truth to the fact that most of us, whatever jobs we're in, you need storytelling as a skill. So, you know, you're a hairdresser, you still have to spin a yarn around what you're going to do to support the customer. You're a mechanic, same thing. You're a surgeon. You're going to have to communicate and tell a story. And so I think having the basics of storytelling sets you up for life. This is probably the contentious part of the presentation. When Tim asked me to think about what I'm hearing about universities and higher education, you know, I'm probably biased by the fact I've got 2 students in my life at the moment. I do wonder whether, so this is a question rather than a statement, but I do wonder whether universities are still trading off the kind of 1960s image of leather patches on elbows and, you know, jackets and hippies and free speech, free love and critical thought. And I do wonder whether that image is broken, because universities are businesses, and like most things, perhaps can't be as free as they'd like to be. Advertisement side, I probably, because I don't see myself as the market so much anymore, I probably don't pay as full attention to the advertising. But what do I tend to see? I tend to see young, usually white, attractive people, maybe standing, looking off into the distance, thinking about their future. There might occasionally be a multicultural scene in a lab, maybe with white coats. I thought RMIT did an interesting campaign a few years back where they had graduates on billboards, and this is what I'm doing with my life since I left. I think that worked to the extent that you had to get the whole story across in one image on a billboard. So if it's a painter like Vincent, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Fantuso or whatever it is, but that was a powerful image because people knew him and his work. And you know, that's not your usual graduate story that's told on a billboard. So kudos for that one. I think universities, like most businesses, are risk averse and potentially compromised by the sources of the money. And you know, I'm speaking freely today because you know, my boss doesn't see this directly related to my job. So you know, we all have to think about where the dollars come from, right? But where is that risk and innovation and creativity message that we look for? I'll be honest and say, in terms of fees and debt, and I know this is not entirely a problem of the sector's making, but I do wonder about students and what bang they feel they get for their buck. My wife has disabilities, and she's studying an allied health degree. It'll be her 3rd or 4th degree. She's doing a master's in speech pathology. And why is she doing a master's in speech pathology? I'll tell you more about that later. But to do her 3rd industry placement, which she's just finished, she was offered 2 options for an industry placement in all of Australia. One was in Wonthaggi in Victoria, and she had 3 days' notice that she had to get there. So that's not even long enough to, you know, warning to book a house stay place, let alone find an NDIS carer to support her in her placement. And the other option was in Bundaberg in North Queensland. And I just think, really, that's the best her university could do. And because she has these challenges in her life, she's been pulled back. Her placements have taken a year longer to find than all her cohort of students. So she's not going to graduate with her peers, which is kind of a real heartbreak for her. I do wonder, I don't know if there's any alumni people in the room. I'm not sure where you all fit in the sector, but I do wonder about the impact of the lockdown years on the graduate community as well. Like my son, his degree ran entirely through COVID, and so he basically had no university experience. Count on the kind of fingers of one hand how many friends he made at uni. And his highlight of his university time was a joke that went viral during a Teams meeting and went right across some of the university chat groups. And so I think it's kind of sad that there is a cohort of young people and mature age students that perhaps don't feel as bonded to their university or their higher education facility as they could. Talk to you quickly about a vendor's view of universities as well. And so the company that I work for sells medical software that is used to run clinical businesses, practices. Our main market is GPs, but we support multidisciplinary clinics. So it can be where allied health practitioners, GPs and specialists are working together. It's a tough market. There are some established products. We are one of the disruptors. We're 10 years in, so we're a scale up, and we're still a small company. We're under 150 people. We have to take procurement seriously when they come up. And so I could tell you I've responded to 14 higher education tenders in the last 3 years, all over Australia. It's a huge time commitment. So I don't know hands up if anyone's ever done one of these procurements. Yeah, a few. You know the nightmare of filling out one of those Excel spreadsheets. Sometimes they're 300, 400 rows of information you've got to fill out and multiple tabs. And that's what you've got to do to win the work. That's fine. But for a small company, it's a huge time commitment, and sometimes for multiple staff. We've won 2 higher education contracts. We've been shortlisted for 4. Of the 3 shortlistings over the last 18 months, of the shortlistings, 3 of them were withdrawn during the process. So that's money down the drain for businesses like us. And it really makes you kind of think how much you want to be engaging with these businesses. We don't have any active higher education clients at the moment. One contract came to an end. The other one, it was a 3-year contract. They paid us out at 18 months because of the infighting within the university around the IT department, the cybersecurity department, the procurement department, the admin teams and the clinical teams. Not even the clinical teams were on the same page as to what they actually wanted. So we had delivered what was in the spreadsheet, but it wasn't what the end users actually thought they asked for. So that disconnect is again, it's devastating. One of the universities we were shortlisted for came back and said, "Oh, the budget, what you've quoted doesn't match what we've got to pay." Well, that's an understanding of the market. But what I do find, and probably shooting myself in the foot, there's a university I'm actively talking to at the moment. The way that tends to be presented to us is we need a teaching tool that also works as a clinical tool in the real world, but it needs to do all these things to support teaching. What I would strongly advise is you look for commercial off-the-shelf products that are used in the workplace, and then work with those teams to see how they can be used in teaching. Because if you want to prepare people for the workforce, They can't be working or learning on a hacked system that's only really ever going to function in a university. So the last tender that came through, second last actually, we chose not to respond. It was clear, it was a really exciting opportunity. It was an innovation campus, but there were so many different clinical teams involved. Even from reading the paperwork, there was disagreement in the spreadsheet. And so I thought, you know, why would I bother? So storytelling is partly about understanding your audience. And so for me, I'm mainly pitching to doctors, mainly to GPs. About 60% of our market is GPs. But I've noticed some trends. I've been with the company for nearly 4 years and all post-lockdown. So what I've noticed is we're getting more and more young doctors coming to us who are interested in using the technology to build a business. Great news. But they're probably going to be using it to build a business working 1 day a week. Why 1 day a week? Because 2 days a week they're working for a virtual emergency department based out of Epping, or 2 days a week they're working for some medicinal cannabis startup that's got money to throw at every young doctor in Australia. Doctors are working more casualised. The healthcare industry is more casualised. And so as a technology vendor, we had to rethink our entire pricing around what are the people, what can people afford and what hours are people working that are in our industry. The image off to the right there, I'm not sure if it's big enough for you to read, but one of our investors has started up a Facebook group, and I don't know about you, but I've stayed away from Facebook for a long time. I find it a bit toxic, but he's created a Facebook group of doctors in aged care, and he's got 3,000 members. And if you look at the demographics, they start around 25 and they peak in the 35 to 44 age bracket. They're skewed strongly towards women. And that really interests me because you think of the GP market in Australia, it's mostly, you're thinking kind of crusty, old, white male, 65, due for retirement. The industry is, the GPs are on the cusp of a crisis. You know, we're going to have a shortfall. So the people that are coming to us as a cloud software service who want a part-time business that will grow with them are mostly young doctors. And so I'm now thinking about where do I tell the story and how do I tell that story differently to appeal to entrepreneurs, to appeal to innovators, to appeal to people that really want to build something new and build a brand, build their patients and their practice, and something that travels with them through their career. So it's a real rethink at the moment around what our story is. Having said that, you know, you never make assumptions because they always make you look like an idiot. So the biggest piece of most successful piece of content we published in the last year is this case study on a 72-year-old doctor. Dr. Gould, her story was, I guess she's an outlier. Most of the doctors we talk to cannot change their thinking about technology. They're not ready to learn anything new. This lady, she's an amazing individual. She's worked in, child protection, coronial stuff. She's been a GP for many decades. She does animal wildlife rescue as well. But yeah, she was willing to learn how to use cloud software because she's starting to think about what happens when she can't work anymore. How does she pass on her medical records? And as you can see from the rather wordy headline there, she's didn't want to pass on 25 filing cabinets of paper. Just around the marketing challenges that I see that kind of align with maybe what the higher education sector is facing, AI is starting to eat traditional advertising. So we monitor the data every month. The traditional Google ads are going down the toilet. We don't even bother with print anymore. We're big in LinkedIn. We do think about website SEO, but website SEO is broken as you know it as well, because AI is starting to change how websites are located. And goodness me, I was talking to some of my younger staff, and they tell me they go to ChatGPT for romantic advice now. So, if that's true, then the world is changing. So we're looking at how we can use AI, how we can change our brand positioning on AI. Social media, I'm having to go back and look at Facebook because some of those communities that are there, and the little icon there at the star or the sun or however you see it, communities have become really important. And so as a vendor, we're part of a community called the Sparked community, which is developing the future standards for connected digital health data in Australia. But universities should be all over the Spark community like a rash. Government's there, aged care's there, disabilities there, vendors are there, consumers are there. It's a really important group for looking at what the future looks like, but it also gets us more traffic on LinkedIn than anything else. So think about the communities where your people belong and look for similar opportunities. And then the slide there, there's a guy who's infamous in digital health called Peter Birch. And Peter is an excellent storyteller and podcaster, but he did a seminar recently and really told the story of how people remember human stories better than they remember statistics. So in the time that we've got left, I'd quickly run you through some of the basics that I use every day. And so I don't know if I've got any Spider-Man fans in the room, but Spider-Man has this thing where he's got his spidey senses tingling and he starts to think something's about to happen and he has to jump in and intervene. For me, it's about story sense, and we should all have it. It's about curiosity. So, look at the people around you, look at the room, look how people sit, look at when you go and have your coffee, listen in on the conversations around you. There are ideas for stories and to get to know people better all around you all the time. And so those top pictures, that's my wife's brain tumor. Sorry. And that's her in the ICU. She was in the ICU for 2 weeks and she was in hospital for nearly 6 months. But she's now doing a degree as a mature age student where she has to write her exams with one hand and one eye, and she doesn't get any extra time allowed. And yeah, go to Bundaberg in Queensland for her placement. So I just think these are the sorts of student stories we want to hear about. It's not always the celebrities that are on the billboards that are, made their fortune with a startup or something like that. You want real human stories that we can connect to, that, find the humanity amongst us all. The biggest post that I've done personally on LinkedIn ever was about a homeless kid that I started talking to a couple of months ago. And I didn't even do it consciously. I posted it because I needed to find help for this child who had nowhere to go. And I began the post with, yesterday as I returned to the office, a young man was emptying out a shopping trolley and setting up his bed under the eaves of my office building. Not a great sentence, not a great lead, but I had nearly 6,000 interactions with that post and actually ended up getting some advice on how it could help homeless young people in our city. And so I think, why did that work? I didn't give it any thought other than I wanted to tell a story. And I think that shows that storytelling joins us all together. The bottom photograph is a cemetery on Kangaroo Island in South Australia. And I know we're pushed for time, but hands up if anybody can see what is different about, what's unusual about that photograph, even at that scale. It's not easy, it's subtle. This photograph was the whole basis for my second novel. And I'm not surprised you can't see it, partly because I made it too small, sorry, but the grave in the foreground is backwards. So all the other graves in the cemetery are facing one way, and that grave is in a far corner facing the opposite direction. And so I went to the historians And I went to the lighthouse keepers and the people from the national park, and I said, why is that grave up the other end? And there was various theories, none particularly grounded, but the prevailing hypothesis was that this was a young girl, she was only a teenager, and that she had killed herself, and that therefore she was seen as an affront to all the other people in the cemetery, so they had to bury her separately. And it takes you back to the historic times of like people who were thought to be witches weren't allowed to be buried in the cemeteries at all. They were buried on unconsecrated ground. Ned Kelly, our most famous, executed person in Melbourne, was buried under RMIT outside the graveyard because he was a murderer. So, that whole thing around what had this teenage girl done that was so bad that she couldn't be with her community, that was the basis for a whole novel. And so I guess I challenge you to look for that unusual thing that's in front of you and find the story there. I'll give you another example from higher education. I'm not sure if you'll be familiar with the pollen counting apps. If any hay fever sufferers in the room, there's a Melbourne pollen app, and there's some for the various other cities around Australia. But because of the technology job that I have, I went out and met with the guys at the botany department at Melbourne Uni that count the pollen, and I knew they'd had some publicity. They'd been in newspapers, and after the thunderstorm asthma event, they were celebrities for a little while. As a journalist, I'm thinking this story's probably been done. Is there anything left to it? But they said, "Oh, Tim, come with us. We'll show you how we count the pollen." And I ended up on a roof of a building in Lygon Street, and they had this crazy machine hooked up. They had a vacuum cleaner sucking air down through a funnel, and the air would land on a microscope slide that they'd put some glue on. And so they were literally sucking pollen into a tube, onto a microscope slide, and then every day some kid would go climb up the ladder, get the slide, put a new slide in there, run down to the lab, and then manually start going 1, 2, 3. And I'd imagine that they'd have some wild and wacky technology way to measure the pollen count in our environment, but they actually were doing it manually. I'm not sure they are now, but because I think they've moved on from the university and trying to set up a business. But that's, for me, is where the fun comes into the story. Like, how do you count the pollen? So always keep asking the next question, and the next question might be the one that gives you the lead to your story or your headline. So we started a little late, but that's kind of what I had prepared. Happy to take questions. Otherwise, I've got a joke up my sleeve. So really, over to you guys. Yes.
The story about what it's really touching. And I think what it kind of speaks to is the point about storytelling and the emphasis on the emotional aspect of that and how authentic that is.
Yeah.
So really my question is, when we're talking about AI and moves across into that kind of realm, how are we able to adapt AI or to almost recreate that authenticity, or that work, in using a system which in effect is, replication of the real world?
You ask a really interesting question, and you put us into a swamp where I won't necessarily have all the answers. But what I've started to notice as a content guy is that my marketing team are using AI tools to generate all their content now. And what's happening to me is you develop an ear for this stuff, and it all starts to sound the same to me. And the AI uses adverbs and words that I don't think humans would use, certainly not so regularly. So for me, I'm actually finding I'm having to rewrite AI now to make it sound more like a human. And so I think authenticity and going back to the basics of us at least writing the first draft, is going to be important. I haven't spent enough time on the tools to train them myself to make them sound authentic. I am terrified as an author that There are authors building their brand by generating AI novels. I'm very resistant of using the technology in case it takes me down a path that takes away the humanity from the story that I'm working on at the moment. So I think it's going to have to be in the training and doing things over and over again and establishing a voice. It's really interesting with doctors. Doctors are widely using AI scribing tools now. And in fact, the software that we sell has integrated with one very high profile product, and we're looking at integrating with some others. What do the AI scribe tools do? They listen to the consult with the patient, and then they format the notes in a particular template for the doctor. But some of the tools ask, what voice do you want to speak your notes in? And do you want to be casual? Do you want to be, academic, professorial, whatever? I think it's interesting that the doctor gets to train what their voice is in the tool. And so I have some hope around the tools having an element of authenticity to them. I do like that, and goodness knows with our healthcare experiences, so much of healthcare is impenetrable to the average consumer. And I feel I'm more health literate than most, but I can tell you, and I'm hoping to write a book about this one day as well, but my wife and I are in one booth in the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and there's a curtain pulled across, and the brain surgeons come in, and they're giving this couple the news that the lady has a fatal, like a glioblastoma, so it's going to kill her within a year, a tumor in her brain. And the way they began that conversation was, well, we've just looked at your scans and they lit up like fireworks. What does that mean to the consumer? That means nothing. Oh, cool, there's fireworks in my head. No, you're going to die. So we need to find ways to use technology to tell stories honestly, but also in language that consumers can understand. And so some of the AI scribe tools actually do give you an option to say, give me a plain English version. And I'm not a clinician, so I haven't kind of tested that in market, but I do think plain English, taking all the fuss out of AI text is a good approach as well, because we're losing the ability to talk to each other in this world at the moment, and we need to find what connects us as humans. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Annabelle from the USA. I love the last slide here about being curious. They told me that early in my career.
Mm.
Quite a fun story. However, my question relates to something very basic, like architecture. I love playing English. You said it early on, like it's really your audience. That sits really well with marketing.
Yep.
And absolutely storytelling as well. But as a professional who's worked with AAP and has awareness for various outlets, what are you looking for from university media and university storytelling to make the story stand out better for you, easily for you as a journalist? Because we're talking to journalists a lot.
As in picking them up in the yeah. What I'm looking for is something that's going to turn into a water cooler conversation, really. I want something that's going to go a little bit viral. Even the broadsheet newspapers are slaves to clicks now. So if it can avoid being about money or about grants or that stuff's all really exciting for the university, but tell me how it's going to change lives. Tell me how it's going to impact on real people. Not always easy when you're working on research that might be some way off before it gets its end results, but like those crazy guys on the roof counting pollen manually, I want to know the fun side. What have you got? People standing in water up to their waists counting fish, or those sorts of things. What are people doing to do this research? It's not all just sitting at screens. So yeah, I want to know the fun part of it as well, and the human part. So not just got a grant, gonna change the world with $200,000. So yeah. So
We are out of time.
Thank you all so much for listening, and yeah, happy to reach out if you want to chat further. I think my computer's having a moment, but I am on the LinkedIn if you want to find me. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jim.
So.